will call this meeting to order. I'm so sorry, I'm reading here. Okay, quorum's reached. Okay, we don't have to do any voting for call. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm new at this. Okay, we'll take roll call now in alphabetical order. Anderson,
Here.
Bork,
Here.
Gade here, Grimm, Harrelson,
Here.
Krylov, Murray, Shetty,
Here.
Silliman,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
and Traer.
Here.
We'll ask staff members to identify themselves.
Sarah Gardner, present.
Can I get approval of the minutes from the January, what day was that? January 6th minutes?
I'd like to move approval with a correction.
Okay.
On the second page, on the third page, I'm sorry, at the top, there's a statement that says, Traer reported flexibility. And I just want to actually request that that be deleted because it doesn't make sense, frankly speaking. I had no report. I wasn't on the session of the meeting, and it must refer to a comment I made about flexible schedules in some way, but I didn't report flexibility, and in fact, I don't think you can report flexibility. I think you have to report something about flexibility. So I just like to ask that a three-word sentence be deleted.
Okay,
I don't think that's a problem.
sounds good. Let's see, can I get you have a motion to approve with the
correction,
deletion?
yes.
Okay. Is there a
Three
second?
seconds.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Public comment on items not on the agenda.
Oh,
wait,
actually,
I'm
we should
sorry,
move
we have
that.
that at the end. Okay, never mind, we'll move on. Okay, so first agenda item today is announcements and reports. So welcome new member Emma Bork to the commission. Emma, do you want to give an introduction of yourself?
Sure. I'm a student at the university. I study environmental policy and planning and sustainability. I'm excited to be here. Every day I learn about things on a global scale, so I'm excited to see community efforts, and yeah.
Well, welcome to the commission. All righty, so we'll go on to item B, action items from last meeting. Staff following up with an email containing a link to the council work session. I'll hand it to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I think that may be the longest email I've sent you in quite some time, but hopefully you did all receive the link that contained, or the email contained the link to the council work session, the legislative priorities, the inclusive transportation virtual discussion, and the Habitat for Humanity video that we discussed in the last meeting. I will also note, it wasn't included as an action item, but one of the things we discussed in the previous meeting is item C, which was in addition to adjusting our meeting time, pushing the period of public comment to the end of the meeting instead of the beginning, so that members of the public who get off work presumably could come here and offer comment. I did double check with the clerk's office to make sure that that was allowable, and it's not a problem. The one thing we just need to be mindful of is that if someone wants to comment on items that are on the agenda, they need to be present for that part of the meeting. So staff, we can do our diligence to make sure folks are here for those portions. I don't anticipate any difficulty with that. We just wanted to mention it now so that you're aware if someone comes in at the end of the meeting and says, oh, I wanted to talk about this thing that we've already discussed, we may have to figure out how best to accommodate that. If that may be asking them to return to the next meeting. So, great. And then item D, upcoming events. As you know, we're going to have our inclusive transportation discussion, the virtual discussion, tomorrow night. Angie is graciously leading up that discussion. We're all very excited about it. We heard that the discussion last week at the library went very well. So, and I believe Megan had reported we have 40 people, 40-some people roughly, signed up to participate in the Zoom discussion. So it should be a good gathering.
Excuse me.
As you may also be aware, we are undertaking our next round of climate ambassador training. And that's going to take place starting at the end of this month and run through April. We always time that with an eye toward people completing the ambassador training in time to participate in the Neighborhood Energy Blitz. So we'll be able to do that this year as well. And then the last item, E, under announcements. As you may also be aware, the City of Iowa City is undertaking this year an update to its comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan is essentially a land use plan for the city that helps guide future growth and development, but can also speak to infill development within the community. And it's called comprehensive in the sense that it's meant to tie together other plans like neighborhood plans and transportation plans into one guidance document. I always try to explain to folks it provides the logical basis for any zoning that comes after, right? So one of the things, if your zoning regulations are ever challenged, that the courts inevitably look at is how they correspond to what's outlined in the comprehensive plan, which is meant to reflect the will of the community in terms of how the community would like to see future growth and development. Obviously, how we grow and develop in the community has big impacts on our climate action initiatives. And so I'm really tickled to say that we were invited to have a representative of the Climate Action Commission participate in the steering committee for the climate action, or for the comprehensive plan process for this year. And Angie has graciously agreed to do that. So one of the other nice things, in addition to having somebody who's very climate-minded participating in those discussions, is that then she gets to report it out to us. So we all get to keep up to date on what's happening. And now that I've given this long preamble that's probably going to be longer than the update since they just started meeting, I'll just turn it over to Angie, and you can expect to see this in future agendas so that Angie can provide additional updates.
Yeah. So we just had our first meeting this month, and so it was kind of just to get to know, what the plan is. So as Sarah said, what a comprehensive plan is. Generally, a city kind of updates their comprehensive plan about every 10 years. So the last comprehensive plan was updated in 2013, and COVID hit too, so that extended things. So it's now time for a new comprehensive plan. The steering committee is made up of two council people, Josh Moe and Megan Alter, 3 people from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and a lot of city or people that live in the community, like stakeholders, someone representing affordable housing, and some developers and builders. And so the first meeting was mostly kind of a survey that they just asked us lots of different questions and things that we reported. We talked about things that we're proud of, how we describe our city, things that we want to improve about our city. It was really interesting to see similar themes, like that several people, one of the things that 6 people were proud of is that we're a fare, free bus system, which I think was really neat. Like, obviously, I wrote that, but like 5 other people also were saying how proud they are about some of our initiatives in our community. So I'm really excited. It should be a really fun process. So the beginning phase just is kind of talking about what the existing plan is. Then there will be public and stakeholder engagement. So there will be several public forums to gather input from other people. And then we'll talk about our goals, draft a plan, and then there will be a final adoption of a plan, hopefully. So it looks like it's more than a year process to develop the comprehensive plan, but yeah, I'm really excited to participate in it.
Thank you. And we'll keep you all updated as well for the public comment periods, should any of you like to go and make comments as well. And Climate Action staff will be identifying portions of the Climate Action Plan that are relevant to the comprehensive plan, so it can be pulled forward and incorporated into that. So very exciting process.
Wonderful. All right, well, that brings us to new business. We'll have mid-year presentations from Climate Action Grant awardees. Let's see, first we have Antelope Lending Library, is that correct? Yep, there we go. Okay.
Hi there. I am Alexis Karth. I'm the Assistant Director at Antelope Lending Library, and we used our Climate Action Grant funds to try and eliminate our use of single-use plastic during our ROAMS deliveries. So Antelope ROAMS stands for Requested Open Access Materials Service, and it is a program that began in 2020 when the pandemic shut down services and closed out. Patrons were unable to check out materials in person, and so we implemented this safe delivery system where we could deliver books straight to their front doors. Excuse me. So librarians would select materials and then we would put them in these giant plastic bags for several reasons. Number one is that it was intended to be a temporary program. And number two is that we didn't know at that time how COVID was transmitting. And so we were using something disposable on purpose so that we weren't contributing to the spread of disease in the community. But since then, we've started services again, obviously, and the demand for these home delivery services persisted. And so we had been using these for a really long time. And they, I don't want to say single use because we use them as many times as we could, but books are heavy and they get torn and dirty and don't keep materials safe anymore. So the demand for these services persisted, and we recognized the need for homebound individual folks who were homebound or were working during library service hours or couldn't get to library locations. So 5 years later, we're still doing this program, and we decided to try and do something a little different with our bags. We started shopping around for some bags that would hold all the books that we needed and be sturdy. And what we found were still plastic bags, kind of like a stadium bag with the nylon handles. But we struggled to get enough of them from vendors that would sell them to us in wholesale that were sturdy enough to hold books and all the things. But then we had a longtime volunteer and supporter come with a creative solution for us. Her and her family started a business in the Pacific Northwest where they take old boat sails and repurpose them. And she sewed us these lovely totes that we went through several iterations. She designed one. It wasn't quite what we wanted. We did a couple of new things on it. And now we have this bag that with the flap on it, it keeps things safe from the weather. So a lot of our deliveries happen with no contact still, either because people can't get to the door by themselves or they're not home during the deliveries, so they sit on porches for a day or maybe 2 days until somebody can get there. And with the weather and books don't always go together in Iowa in the winter. So these bags have been incredibly helpful. We purchased 60 of these bags from them. And they not only keep our materials clean and dry as we deliver to patrons, but also they are repurposing something that was already bound for the landfill into something that was purposeful again. So we purchased 60 of those, which replaces the approximately 550 plastic bags that we've used in the last 5 years to deliver 1,600 books to 1,300 homes in Johnson County. And we hope that as our program grows, that we'll be able to buy some more of these in the future, maybe with another grant. And hopefully we will continue to use them forever until they wear out. And as part of our education to our community, we created a little flyer that talks about where the bags came from and how to use them and removing plastic from your own home as to educate our patrons. Do you have any questions for us?
Creative.
Thank you.
Yeah, looking at it beforehand, I was just curious who made them and where they came from. And so you said this is a new business now?
Yeah, so one of our volunteers, she used to live here in Iowa City, and she did our sensory stop here in Iowa City for 5 years. Before they moved to the Pacific Northwest. And when they moved out there, they just opened this shop to create things with sewing. And I'm not sure how they got into the sales. Cassie, do you know?
Yeah, it's a long story.
But yeah, so.
But it's called Renegade Marine.
Renegade Marine, yeah. and they're really great. And she loves us and did a lot of modifications for us, so we really appreciate her. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Very cool. Okay, next up, we have Burr Oak Land Trust.
Would you like me to transfer to your slide deck?
That'd be awesome, thank you. Great. So my name is Jason Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of Burr Oak Land Trust. We've been in the Johnson County area for about 46 years at this point. And the focus of our grant is actually working on increasing the biodiversity of a very specific area or very specific type of plant in Iowa City, which is the shrub, the native shrubs. You want to slip to the next slide there? That'd be awesome. We have the opportunity as residents of Iowa City to really help one specific type of animal, and that's the pollinators. Iowa City, for those of you that don't know about it, it's actually home to an endangered bumblebee species called the rusty patch bumblebee. We've done a lot of work to identify areas of the city that have these bees in them. And one of the really interesting things is that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has designated that Iowa City actually is critical habitat for the rusty patch bumblebee. There's only one place in the entire state of Iowa, and it's within this, Iowa City, that we actually have critical habitat for this bee species. And so what we're doing with the grant funding is we're actually going to be focusing on trying to improve the number and diversity of native shrubs. So enhancing that will help not only the bee species, but obviously all the other pollinators as well as a number of animals as well. Next slide. The shrub area is really overlooked oftentimes. Most people will think about planting trees. If they're going to be doing an environmental project, most people think about planting trees. It's absolutely important to have good trees, but there are a lot of reasons to focus on shrubs as opposed to trees. So one is that it's a physical niche that isn't really being occupied in most parts of the city, let alone in the county or in the state. Iowa currently has more trees now than it did during the European time, or before the European settlement time. And so we actually have a lot of trees. One thing that we are missing, though, is that entire shrub layer. And so what we're finding is that while urban trees are often impacted by big storm events like we had with the derecho, or they're impacted by the droughts, the shrub layer isn't always as impacted by those events. And so oftentimes when we have eradication of a lot of trees because of storms, the shrubs do pretty good. And so the other thing that we're really focusing on is that the shrub layer within the city as well as within the state is actually being replaced by invasive shrubs. And so a lot of the native shrubs you just don't find anymore. And so our goal was to bring back the native shrubs to this part of the city. Next slide. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be providing bundles of shrubs to individuals within Iowa City so they can plant them on their properties. We've selected 4 different species of shrubs: the arrowwood, viburnum, hazelnut, serviceberry, and wild plum. One of the reasons that those are so critical to pollinators is that in the early spring, when the queen bumblebees first come out of hibernation, they need resources immediately. So they need pollen, they need nectar, and a lot of the flower species are not available at that point in time. And so the native shrubs actually flower very early. So by providing them with the resources earlier on, we're actually helping the queen bees build their populations for the rest of the year. These 4 species are all native to this area. They also provide either a fruit or a nut that both animals as well as humans can enjoy. And then the other element of this program is for individuals who are renting that do not have the ability to plant shrubs on the property that they own or that they live in. We're actually providing pots with a couple different native prairie species. And so these are pots that you can actually grow even on a deck or on just a little area outside. And these are important species for pollinators as well. They'll bloom a little bit later throughout the year, but obviously it's still important to provide the species with habitat all times of the year. All this stuff is being supplied by local providers. So Troutleaf as well as Lucy Soil are providing the pots, the soil, as well as the plants. And then we're getting all the shrubs from the DNR forestry program. This opened up about a week ago, and these numbers are a couple days out of date, but it's been pretty popular so far. And so we've had over 50 packets of 4 shrubs have already been spoken for, and we're actually going to be working with some individuals from the city of Iowa City to target a couple neighborhoods. There was a really interesting study done back in 2019 that shows that there are certain areas of Iowa City that have a deficiency in pollinator resources, and so we're going to be targeting those areas to see if we can provide some more resources for the pollinators. This is all going to be taking place, or the commencement of the event is going to be in mid-April when we're able to get the shrubs and then work with the homeowners to get those into their yards. The QR code is just a link to the page that people have the ability to access this program. And I believe that is the presentation. This the last slide? Awesome. Any questions?
You have a handout of any kind that identifies these 4 native shrubs that you're trying to encourage use of in the community?
We do, yeah. We're actually going to have a handout that talks about how to plant shrubs and like how to identify them when they first come up. When they get these, they're bare root stock, and so they're going to look like sticks. And so it's very easy for people to mistake them when they plant them one year and they don't really notice it the next year. So we're going to have some identification guides and things like that as well.
Is there we have a serviceberry tree in our yard. Is that the same as the shrub, basically? Or?
It is. Yeah, so there are different variants of the serviceberry, but that is, yeah, it's a really important shrub.
This is Smith. I was just wondering what the grant actually, did it pay for the shrubs, or what amount, or what all did it purchase?
Yeah, so it was the shrubs, all the shrubs that were purchased, and so we had, the number was like 225 times 4, so it's about 1,000 shrubs total, as well as all the prairie plants, and so 150 prairie plants, and then 50 pots in soil. The grant paid for all of those supplies.
And can you recall what neighborhoods were you trying to specifically target, or do you?
We're working with Tashaylin. I'm not sure, Tashayla Harrington, I believe is her last name.
She's our neighborhood services coordinator.
Yeah, and I believe it was the east side neighborhood. We kind of talked about a couple different zones. But if anyone's interested, I actually have some maps that show some of those areas of deficiency where there's more pollinators and not enough resources. And this is a fascinating study that shows that there's actually a socioeconomic status connection to where there were high levels of bee diversity as well as high levels of plant diversity. And so it's a really interesting study from 2019.
Yeah, this is Harrelson. That was kind of my question too, was tying in with equity and how are we, using these resources around town, and we're going to talk later, I think, in the meeting about how some of our other resources are spread around town. So that'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and one of the things that we want to do for next year is actually expand this program so that we're able to target a couple more neighborhoods. So we're using this year basically as just a beginning to this project. Obviously, there's only going to be more demand in the future, more need in the future. And so we're looking at hopefully working with Tashaylin as well as other people from the city to help target various neighborhoods and other ways that we can enhance the program.
I just wanted to note that we were able to make the connection between Jason and Tashaylin to help with the neighborhood outreach, which is just a great example of how these grants are functioning as intended, which is to help the organizations connect with other city resources that can help them further expand the offerings. So we're just tickled about this. If any of you would be interested in signing up for shrubs yourselves, I can double check. I don't believe that's a conflict of interest, but I'll double check with the city attorney's office and send a follow-up email if you'd like. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Okay, next we have Nomadic Foods.
Hi, my name is Molly, and this is my business partner.
My name's Connor.
We own Nomadic Foods, that's our LLC, but we have a coffee shop on the north side of town, Kindred Coffee. It's on the corner of Lynn and Bloomington. And then we also have a stand at the farmer's market, like just out front there every week. And we did that as Nomadic Foods for 2 years, and then Kindred Coffee this past year. We just changed up our name once we got a physical location.
In addition to other events around town.
Yeah.
similar Arts Fest, Jazz Fest, et cetera.
But anyway, we have both the physical cafe and the mobile side of our business. And the goal of our project is to reduce paper and plastic waste going to the Iowa City landfill by encouraging the use of reusable instead of disposable food takeaway containers, so both for drinks and food. This will like reduce emissions in the landfill, and then we also have less shipping emissions because we no longer are like continuously getting cups and takeaway containers shipped to us. So more specifically, what we did is we implemented a jar program. So when our customers come and get coffee from us to go, they have two options. You can either use the traditional disposables, or you can get a glass jar from us. It's a deposit of $1. If you ever bring the jar back to us, you get your $1 back. But when you come get a drink from us, you get 10 cents off. So within, including that very first purchase. So like within 10 uses of the jar, you get your $1 back. You save a little bit of money. We don't have to use disposables any longer. Go ahead.
In addition, we implemented a 10-cent charge on all of our single-use disposable plastic and paper products to encourage the renewables at a higher rate of adoption.
Yeah, and just some implementation highlights. It was honestly better received than we initially anticipated. We had a little bit of hesitation, like with us and the staff, about the 10-cent charge just getting pushed back from our customers, but people have been generally jazzed about it. Lots more people like willing to adopt the glass jar if the option is provided for them, like in the moment that they need it. We'll see how many people like continue to bring them back, but at least at that first decision point, like where they can either choose a traditional disposable or a glass jar, we've seen almost 50% choose glass so far.
That was much higher than we thought it would be.
Yeah, so we were like, our goal was 25%. So we'll see like how long we can sustain that. Like I said, the return rate, like we know other coffee shops that do jar programs and they have issues with people like bringing them back. But so yeah, just getting our staff on board with that, excited about it, educating our customers on how to use the program and the benefits of the program, and like kind of getting them on board with a minor inconvenience on their end. They have to remember to bring this glass jar back to us. A minor inconvenience on our end. We have to like store the jars.
Wash them when they're returned.
Yeah, wash them when they're returned.
Keep
like,
track of people's specific jars if they bring them back to reuse.
Yeah, but all in the name of reducing waste and greenhouse gas emissions.
Some challenges to our implementation. It took us a while longer than we thought to map out exactly how this would function, what the exact discounts or charges would be, and other incentives, whether we would give someone $1 back or just keep the charge, where to store everything, and how we would walk through another question to ask people while they were ordering. Is it hot or iced? For heat or to go? Okay, cool. Glass or plastic? Because the glass does not really see a huge benefit to being used until it's done 2 or more times, basically. Otherwise, if people get a drink and throw it away, it can be more wasteful than plastic.
It can. We have we buy cups that are meant to degrade in the landfill. So considering like how long it would take the glass to break down, there'd be more emissions if people only used it one time. So like incentivizing them to use it again. Another challenge in the implementation was just like coming up with a policy that was broad enough that we wouldn't have to make a lot of exceptions. When it comes to food service, like everyone just has like their own specific way they want things. So figuring out how we can make a policy that serves the most number of people so that exceptions are rare and they're excited about adopting. And yeah, our next step, we want to introduce a
Sort of a similar deposit program, but for our wholesale partners. We've done this with our espresso provider, our provider for most of our beans, not just espresso, where he used to package everything in a 5-pound bag, put a sticker on it, take time weighing it all out into this bag and sealing it, and then he'd come and bring us, 8 or 10 bags at a time, and then we would just open them all and dump the beans out and throw them away. So we now have a bucket system where he can load like 30 pounds up into a bucket and drop it off. We'll empty it and we'll give it back to him, and he'll just go and refill it. He saves a little money and time in his packaging. We
And we have
save a
just
little
less
money
waste.
because he doesn't charge us for his packaging, and it's easier to just take 30 at a time as opposed to 6 bags of 5.
So yeah, we're pretty jazzed about like the buy-in from the community, like both our staff and our customers on this project. So next step, additionally, is to move to the food containers. So that will be more of like the mobile side. The to-go drinks are really like our big business at the cafe. But when we restart the farmers market, we're going to have food containers because we have a lot of people that come and get like the same thing every single week at the farmers market. Part of their weekly ritual. And so we will offer them the opportunity to purchase a reusable food container from us and bring it back for a similar discount on their food. So that will be coming to the mobile stand as well. Any questions?
Kindred Coffee located?
It's on the corner of Lynn and Bloomington, like kitty corner from Polly Eye Pizza on the north side. And our stand is like literally right outside the doors of City Hall if you want to come for the farmers market. Any other questions?
Yeah, for the reusable containers at the
Yeah.
farmer's market, after you eat, then could you just take it and drop it off?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, because we like wash and sanitize everything. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I know the trash cans are always so full.
I have a question. What is the drink in the picture? Because it looks delicious.
That's our blackberry pie latte. So it was like a cinnamon vanilla syrup and then a blackberry vegan cold foam with little vegan gluten-free pie crumbles. That'll be back in the summer.
Wonderful.
Mrs. Smith, I was curious, you were talking about storage, like, you probably don't have, but like, what does that look like to store this many?
It takes up a lot more room because our
Our back room is incredibly small.
Our plastic cups came in sleeves, of 50, but they all nestle inside each other. So it'll take up this much space. You can have 1,000 in like this much room, and the jars don't nestle. There's just a lot of dead space. You have several boxes before you have 1,000. And it weighs a lot, so it's just harder to move around.
Yeah. But it's mostly like a space constraint for us because we have a big coffee shop, but it's mostly dedicated to seating. So our storage is pretty limited. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, for other people to, like, adopt this, it seems really exciting, but you can see where, like, storage might, like, not, like, people might be afraid to try it.
Yeah.
We started storing some of our non-perishables in the garage that's attached to the space, and the detriment there is just having someone leave during service to walk 45 seconds out to the garage, grab another pack of whatever it is, and come back, and then not be there to help customers for like a minute and a half, as opposed to just popping behind a wall for 5 seconds.
Which seems like not a long time, but if you've ever worked food service, that's a long time. So, or it can be.
That's like 40 minutes.
Yeah. But our solution to the storage problem is we're just buying them in smaller quantities, like rather than purchasing like 1,000 jars all at once, we're doing like 100 jars at a time. And then we'll sell 50 and then we order the next one. So we'll be restocked before we run out, but we don't have to keep like a massive amount of jars on hand. But that just puts a little bit more of the mental load on us to keep a daily inventory and then order it when necessary. So, which we do for other things, but that's a trade-off.
Have you had other businesses that are similar to yours ask you questions that are interested in doing something like this?
So far, no. There is another coffee shop in town that does only glass. That's Day Drink Coffee. So they have no disposable, they do only glass. We chose to keep both because of what we talked about earlier, glass is effective once you reuse it, at least 2 times. So we chose to keep the disposables because we just do have those customers that they're going to toss the glass jar, and in that case, we'd rather give them what's intended to be disposed of.
We're relatively close to the highway for that exit of Iowa City to Duke Street. So we get a lot of people that are going on road trips and they just want something to go, and they're going to toss it. That was part of what we thought.
And they know that, and like so far when we ask people, they're like, oh, I want the paper cup today or whatever. But no one has approached us with the interest of like implementing it on their own, not yet.
I can say climate action staff have been approached by other businesses and organizations in the community. And in fact, we've been in conversation with resource management to see if we could develop a small parallel grant program to support those who want to move over from disposable to reusable containers. So, with Jason's wonderful presentation, we talked about how one of the goals of this program is connecting applicants with other city resources that can support what they're doing. Another goal is for us to keep an eye out for trends as to grant programs that may be beneficial as a standalone grant, and this is a really great example of one that's doing that.
This is Harrelson. Along those lines, do you have any lessons learned that you think would be beneficial to other folks to know about, either in planning and preparing or in actually implementing?
Honestly, for me, the lesson learned is it is not as scary as you think it will be. Our big concern is that people wouldn't want to do it and that they would be upset about the additional charge. And it's minimal, right, 10 cents, but it's still 10 cents. And it's a change. And sometimes that can be hard, especially like with coffee. It's a ritual for people. They come like every day at the same time and do the same thing. So when things change, it can just be kind of a shock. But we've received like only good things, like only support. Even if people don't want to adopt it, they're like in support of the program. So I would say don't be afraid was the thing that I learned. Anything else from you?
I think that's it.
Well, thanks to everyone for coming in today and giving these presentations. If we look a little sad, it's because you're the last of our mid-year presentations. And it's a little like Christmas to hear all the great work that's being done. So thank you all. And I should also say you are under no obligation to stay for the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you.
Danny, would you like to pop up and share next steps on the climate action grant process?
Sure. So we are preparing to open up the application process for the next year of climate action grants. That application will open on March 1st. So now is a good time to start mulling over whether or not you would be interested in serving on the scoring committee. We typically ask 2 members of the commission to help other city staff score the applications. So at the next meeting, we'll probably be asking for 2 volunteers to join us for about 2 hours in April to score those applications. And I do bring snacks, so a little incentive for you.
You can stay up there because we're going to talk about the transportation memo next. I'll just also note, this is a great time for any businesses or organizations that you work with that you think might benefit from a climate action grant to be encouraging them to reach out to staff. One of the things we do is we maintain Danny leads up the efforts to score and coordinate with the committee that does so. And I stay out of that process so that I can advise intended applicants as to ways to strengthen their applications without any fear of, giving them an undue advantage. So anyone who's thinking about it, please do feel free to put them in contact with me. I'm always happy to meet with community members and talk about the process and help them figure out, what they need to get in line to put an application together. Great.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, we will move on to the NCS survey transportation mode data.
You saw in your packet a memo on transportation mode split data from both the American Community Survey conducted by the Census Bureau and the Iowa City Community Survey, which was discussed in more detail at the last meeting. You can see the similarities and differences of where mode split penciled out in those 2 different studies. The memo explains, I won't get into the technical details, but the memo explains the differences between how the data is collected But you can see there's some similarities in having that local Iowa City community survey really double check and confirm some of the data from the ACS was really nice to have. But you can see those numbers next to each other. And we wanted to know if you had any questions about that data. And then we'd welcome any additional thoughts or suggestions based on the data. Which data to monitor and report on to you all, and how to track progress towards emissions-free transportation.
Question, if weather has been a factor in designing data and experiments. I mean, I know I walk downtown when it's better weather, and then I ride the bus actually when it's not. So I'm just assuming that others may have similar behaviors.
That was one of our, not concerns, but one of the things we wanted to make sure that we understood and that everyone on this commission understood was that the ACS, the American Community Survey, is taken like 1 week out of the year. So that could have a big influence on whether someone rides a bus, takes a bike, or drives by themselves that week. The Iowa City Community Survey was a much wider. It asked how often you use those different modes throughout the entire year. So it was a more catch-all sample because people were able to report that they do bike sometimes versus drive a car other times, ride a bus at other times. So it was nice to have that local community survey available to give folks an opportunity to give a wider, impression to consider those weather factors.
Mrs. Smith. There was some really exciting things in here, but I'm curious to ask you first, were you surprised by any of the data and what it was surprising?
Just looking at ACS data in the latest year available, which is only 2023 versus the last time we checked it and reported it out in the metrics report, there has been a decrease in folks who work from home. I know that the local community survey didn't ask about that, but the ACS does consider working from home as a commute mode split option. So while that data showed that the number of folks working from home decreased, also the amount of people driving alone decreased as well. So it's not like, we've heard the trends locally and nationally about employers requesting folks to come into the office and not work from home, at least not as frequently as they did during the pandemic. But those folks are not getting in their cars and driving along en masse. They are distributed among some other transportation options.
Well, when I was reviewing the data, I'll say I was really surprised about the Iowa City data being 10% of people taking bikes. Like, that was a shocking number to me. In a really pleasantly surprised, shocking, excited, because I think I've always known the 3% number, like the websites I look at, People for Bikes and the American, I guess probably the ACS. I've always thought it was 3 to 4% of Iowa City people bike for transportation, and to see the 10%, I really feel like puts us in comparison to other cities, like in the United States, one of the best cities that really people bike frequently for transportation is like Davis, California, and that's at like 17%. So if we're really at 10%, like I always thought 10% would be a goal, and if we're already at 10%, like, that's really exciting to me, and like, then what do we shoot for? 17% or 40%, I don't know. I won't get ahead of myself, but like, I don't know, I just thought that 10% was worth celebrating. I think that was surprising to me and exciting in some ways, yeah. I mean, I see a lot of people out there biking for transportation, and maybe that number is maybe more accurate than the 3 to 4%.
I'm wondering maybe popularity of e-bikes too, if that has anything to do with that.
Yeah, and we have businesses that are selling them in our community, yeah.
I do find it interesting that on the active transportation modes, the community survey results didn't really reflect the ACS results, but on the other modes, they're basically spot on. So it is interesting that both walking and biking is reported more frequently in the local survey versus the ACS survey.
Yeah, and what accounts for that difference, yeah.
Yeah, we can only speculate. I will say, lest we rest on our laurels, it's possible that some of this reporting is accounting for leisure riding as well. But I would caution against discounting it for that reason, right? Because many people who come to commute by bike begin as leisure riders. Very few commuters start out as commuters right out of the gate, right? And so that tells us there's a lot of possibility there to work with.
Yeah, at the end, when you were in your summary, you talk about that very issue, I think Iowa, we have a lot of recreational riders, and that is something I really ponder a lot, is how do we get these people that already own a bike, how do we get them to consider using it for transportation too? It's something I ponder a lot. I don't know if anyone has ideas on, on that, but that's something I do think about. So I saw that you highlighted that, yeah.
I always think of like eliminating the barriers to doing it. So is it you don't want to be all sweaty for work? Well, do you have showers at work, or a place where you could change at work? And if not, then then that's kind of a barrier. Or are you running late in the mornings like me, where I don't have the time, right? How do you get there sooner, and how do you prepare for that? And yeah, there's so many things, so many factors I feel like that go into it that'd be interesting to look into.
Well, specifically that group, because they already own a bike. I think of owning a bike is barrier number one, right?
Absolutely.
And so do you want to invest in something you may not use? But if you already own a bike, then, and then when I have talked to people who recreational ride, I guess the thing I hear them say is they're concerned for their safety. They're like, well, I recreational ride in safe places, but I wouldn't, the way to get to my work is, there's not really there's not a trail or, so to me, it's been interesting to hear them, like, that's a confident cyclist who bikes regularly, who won't bike for transportation.
I'm assuming the Iowa City Community Survey included Coralville and the bus systems of the university, as well as city transport. Is that correct?
I know that Iowa City residents were the only ones that were sent that survey. But I guess we don't know if they might use CAN bus, they might use Coralville Transit to get out to Coralville, but we just don't know.
We don't have any data of the breakdown of sort of those three systems in terms of the bus side of this question.
Right.
Because when I take the bus, the streets are full of buses. We're on the Coralville routes, they come by, and then all these different university systems. It's quite remarkable, as I see it.
I know that was a goal of the transit study, is to make the three transit systems work more interchangeably and make it easier for folks to use all three. Iowa City used to have many more routes to go past the north side of the hospital, up Newton Road and down Hawkins, and all but one of those routes was cut because it was shown how frequently CAN bus served that area. So there was a push to try to get folks, regardless of where they lived, if they were going to that area, to take CAN bus versus Iowa City Transit. I don't know how that has borne out in the ridership numbers, but it was a goal.
This is Shetty. I might be missing something here, but in Table 1, the Iowa City Community Survey, is this just the dominant mode of transportation? And I'm wondering why the percentage is more than 100 for Iowa City.
So that was, those numbers are folks who take those modes 5 or more times a week. So that was just self-reported that they use those modes at least 5 times a week. So it could be more than 100 if they reported, both driving and walking, something like that.
Okay, so they could pick 2 for more than 5 times a week. Okay, got it.
This is Harrelson. The up top, it kind of says, the goal of doing this, what we're really trying to achieve here is our climate action plan goal of 55% of vehicle trips with more sustainable transportation, and then you give what that is categorized as. Do we have, and then as I understand it, this is all giving us more data to add context to sort of focus our efforts so that we know how to get there, right? Do we have data, or how are we measuring that actual 55% of rides? Does that make sense? And how are we going to measure that in the future to say when we hit that or don't or whatever? Because I think to that point, this is good. This is adding useful data, but it's asking different questions than that piece of data, if that makes sense.
Leave it to the person with the science background to call us out on this. No, I think you raise a really excellent point. The truth of the matter is we don't have a reliable way of measuring, the 55% of rides. We have to do it in an approximate way. And part of the intention behind including this with the community survey is up until now, the only data we had was ACS data. So this was seen as a move in that direction. And in part, it was worded in such a way as to try to be really comprehensible to the people taking the survey. To truly get the kind of data that you're referring to, we would need to do some travel diaries or travel surveys, which actually, it's a great question. We should bring it up with the MPO. It's not a method that's regularly employed, but sometimes can be employed as part of transportation studies. So we can ask what the intentions are there. But I can say in terms of this data, and you might have picked up on this when you heard the presentation to City Council, the hope is that this same question will be repeated in future iterations of it so that we can begin to have some data to compare against. And I'd say for us, that's step one, just to see if any of these numbers shift at all.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say this is a bad question to ask. I think this is great because it gives all of this sort of motivational information about, okay, it helps us see taken together, the data suggests, an umbrella campaign. I liked that paragraph a lot, and you're sort of drawing results on okay, we can focus our efforts on these places where there are people doing this multiple times a week, but just maybe not every day, so we can encourage them to do it more and more. I think that's the perfect way to use this data, it seems to me. I was just curious then about that overall metric, if we ever measured that or what that was.
Yeah, I'll follow up with the MPO and try to report back at the next meeting to see what they have to say. I will say, in the shorter term, for those who are interested in data collection, we actually have an exciting opportunity taking shape. And this actually gets back to Angie's point about confident bike riders and those who may want more protected structure or facilities throughout the city. The city is getting ready to put in place its first bollarded bike lane later this year. And we have been working with the MPO to design a data collection related to that, where we're going to go out and take before numbers and after numbers. So we're going to see how many people are riding on that street at different times of the day before the bollards go in, and then we're going to send folks back out and do the collection. And of course, one of the great things that's exciting for us is we've really, in the last couple of years, built up a nice volunteer network of folks who are interested in helping us collect climate action-related data. So we're going to tap into the communication channels that we've used for the Spot the Hot campaign and the Coco Roz training that we sponsored last year, and hopefully get some of those same folks and some new folks to help us gather data. We're expecting that the first data collection event would happen in May, so we'll certainly keep you all updated as that takes shape, and we're hoping to tie it in fact, to Bike to Work Week. So this year, when we hand out breakfast on Bike to Work Week, it will come with a request to help us collect some data, which will be fun.
That's so exciting.
Have you asked the university and the Coralville bus systems if they have ridership data by their own surveying or some system that, I mean, it's an economic issue for them, and so I would assume that they would have some data like that on participants.
Oh, yes. That's a requirement of getting federal grants. So they do have that data, and it's publicly available. We can get that easily.
On Newton Road in the morning, both Coralville buses come down, 4 university buses come down, and number 10 comes down, and so I mean, you're seeing an incredible infusion of folks into the city on Newton Road, because that's where I ride the bus, every morning, and I assume every evening. So it'll be very interesting, just in one segment, to get a sense of the population using that bus, those systems.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that information. Head on to the next agenda item. We'll review an old business revisions to equity mapping approach.
We're really excited about this one, actually. I'm going to bring up some slides that Danny has prepared so that those of you who are reading this on a phone or a small screen may have an easier time seeing.
So we have a lot of new folks on the commission that might not have seen the older iterations of the equity map. So just a quick background. We've been trying to map our efforts or the outcomes of our programming in terms of originally different factors such as income, race, all sorts of demographic factors, and that turned out to be a very unwieldy map to, try to display so many different factors on a single map and be able to turn on and off different demographic points. So we moved on from that to using Justice 40, which was a program of the previous administration where specific census tracts were identified as disadvantaged. You can see here, these are the 2 census tracts within Iowa City, which are categorized as disadvantaged. But with the change in administrations, Justice 40 is no longer a viable program. So instead, we've been moving on to heat maps. We can show a couple of examples here. Here's a heat map of the utility discount program. You can see the different shades, different colors to show the density of participation in that particular program. And we are thinking that displaying the information in this way can point out how some areas that might not be getting as much attention as they should, or if we take a look at the next map, actually you can see there's a big area of a big space where there are a lot of participants in the utility discount program, but there's not as much participation in the insulation grant program. So that mismatch we were able to identify just based on these two different heat maps side by side. But it is a goal to, of course, distribute our efforts as equitably as possible. So based on the past mapping efforts and these new proposed heat maps, we welcome any additional thoughts and suggestions of how best to complete equity reviews and how to communicate that to the commission and to the public.
Essentially, just to sum it up, in the past, we've presented maps that were designed to try to help us gauge the equitable distribution of resources under our programs. And although we did what was asked, they weren't particularly usable in helping us direct future activities. When you might have come across this in the memo, Danny and I were engaged working with a graduate student from Iowa State University who wanted to do some equity analysis of our programs. And in that process, we engaged with a lot of conversations that had us thinking like, well, why isn't this working and how could we do this better? And one of the ideas we had was that the utility discount program really serves as an effective proxy of vulnerable households. And we started thinking, well, we have those mapped out. If we use that map and then we tried to create a similar distribution map for other programs and compared them, would that provide us some guidance for how we could change or give us some actionable items? So it's not just you created a map, you've completed that class assignment, on to the next thing, but actually to honor the intention of the activity, right? And so we were really excited, if excited is the right word. We decided to try it with the insulation grant as just kind of a test case. And as you can see, very different distribution in those maps. And right away, when we saw that, we knew, all right, we need to be getting out more into the west side, or at least better understanding why we don't have the same kind of uptake. And so to Shayla Harrington, who you've heard earlier is our neighborhood outreach specialist, we engaged with her right away. She had several ideas about ways we could reach out to these west side neighborhoods, which have been implemented. And also identified maybe some of the limitations. In this case, some of the emphasis on the east side versus the west side is there's more home ownership on the east side of town rather than the west side of town. And so thinking about, could we add an additional layer that looks at rental properties and multifamily properties to help just sort of sort out a little what it might be so that we can be even more targeted, seemed like a good next step. So we are in the process of doing all these things, but of course, us being excited about it's one thing. You are the commission and charged with receiving this information, and we wanted to just touch in with you and make sure that this approach seems sensible to you. If you would prefer that we go back and use Justice 40 tracts, we can. If you would prefer we keep exploring and bring other ideas to you, you can. But at the moment, this feels like the most viable option we've got. And we just wanted to share it with you for thoughts and feedback.
Do you have the map, or if not a map, some data as to I'll just call it student residential population? We assume that's in rentals, of course, but maybe that's the same thing, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm just asking that question in terms of these maps. I think these local maps are great myself, instead of the Justice 40. And so I think it's a great direction. I was just thinking, where all the students are and whether they're falling into the lower income areas.
That's a great question. I don't think we have that data on hand, but I don't know if we could find it or not either.
I think you bring up a really great point, and this actually was one of the limitations we identified with the Justice 40 approach, which, if you think about it, makes sense from a national level, like you need one standard that can be applied nationally, but when you get to the local level, you can kind of see how it might be off. We don't have exact data on where all the students live, but anecdotally and observationally, we know that there's a higher concentration in the downtown area and the areas immediately around the university, and it gets a little sparser as we move out. What's really interesting about your question, Robert, is we've started hearing anecdotally as well that one of the effects of the Fare Free initiative is that students are feeling empowered to live further from campus, knowing that they can take a bus in, which is really great to think about, like just spreading and mixing and all the wonderful things that can come from that. But we realized the limitation, just knowing this about the high concentration of students in downtown, is that it was skewing our data, making it look like downtown was a high poverty area. And that actually, I will say, also led to some other more refined thinking about our census tract approach overall. If you think about a larger city, like we often look at Chicago as a comparison, census tracts tend to be more homogenized in larger communities like that. So analysis based on a census tract level makes more sense. Here, if you look at any one of the census tracts, and I don't know if they're as clearly delineated on this first one or not, but in our census tracts, you can have $900,000 homes in the same census tract as $100,000 homes, right? We are, like all cities, not as racially mixed as might be hoped for, but we are more so than other cities. When you look at, when we used to have the layers that showed demographic information by race, it was a variation of like smaller degrees than you would see in larger cities. And that was one of the reasons why the information wasn't as helpful and guidance for us, because the differences, and we noted this actually working with the ISU student, were pretty nuanced, right? And so I think thinking about all of this together had led us to saying, not that students aren't important, Emma, we're so happy you're here with us, but the kind of low-income status that a student may have is perhaps different from the low-income status of someone in another stage of life that may reflect, in a student it may be more temporary, whereas it may be more entrenched in other populations. And so just trying not to weed out students, but to understand what those differences might mean and try to create a map accordingly that just better accounts for where very pronounced need might be in the community is good. And I'll actually say, poor Robert, you're never going to ask a question again. I've rambled so much on this one. But one of the other takeaways we had is in working with the ISU student who helped us get to thinking about all of this is she had a sense that because our utility program was spread out all over the city instead of being concentrated in these few areas, that it might be an equity concern, right? And we had to explain, like, actually, it's really great that it's spread out across the community because that suggests that we're not sequestering poverty in our community, right? That it's more integrated, which, even better yet, would be to eliminate poverty. But until that happens, just knowing that they're not sequestered is, I think, a good thing.
This is Anderson. My only other thought would be, like, and you guys have maybe already done this, but like, is there like housing data that's available through the city or the county, like through the housing authority, that shows like a GIS breakdown of economic or like socioeconomic distribution or something across the city or something? I don't know if that's something. I feel like all these things are going to be approximations anyway. I really like what you guys have. I think the heat map idea is like kind of brilliant, really. But that's the only other thing I would think to kind of dovetail into that is, yeah, just a thought.
There's been some data gathering on lead water pipes in our community.
Mm-hmm.
This might be indicative as well, not only of older housing, but also of equity issues in terms of neighborhoods. That might be interesting.
Yeah, and those maps are very detailed. They're maintained by our water distribution folks, so they really know where those pipes are. Is anyone unfamiliar with heat maps? I ask this only because it came up in a recent staff meeting, and I did a terrible job of explaining how they work, but I've had a whole weekend to think about it. And so I'll just offer for anyone who might be unfamiliar, part of the reason we did this is we also had, in previous iterations of the map, we had little dots that showed where every home was, right? And we realized that there may be an equity issue there too, if somebody could point out and be like, oh, that's my house, you know, or more rightly, if a neighbor's like, oh, the person next door is getting utility assistance. We want to be very respectful of privacy concerns. And so what a heat map does is it broadens the size of that dot. And where dots overlap, the more the more density that results from those overlapping layers, the brighter or deeper the color is. So you can see on these maps, it comes out as yellow in areas where there's a high concentration of households receiving either the insulation grants or the utility assistance, and there's red where it's sort of medium density, and then gray sort of shows a little more diffusion. And so that's how it's effectively read. I'm saying that mostly to prove to myself that I can explain a heat map.
That was good. This is Harrelson. Can you tell us a little more maybe about the details of the utility discount program? Because we're essentially using that as a proxy for low income status, right? Or
Right. This is a program that's offered by the City of Iowa City, and it specifically refers to the costs borne for water utilities, where households can come to the city and there's an economic threshold based on their income, based on tax filings, and once they demonstrate that need, then they qualify to get assistance with the payment of their, which is to say they pay a reduced rate on their utilities. And we actually have some funds that are dedicated to making up the difference. The City Council actually has recently been talking about changing the income qualification level for that so that more households can participate, recognizing that costs are rising in a number of different categories, and that a household that is burdened with its water utilities costs likely is also burdened with electricity costs and food costs. And so if we can help more households out with the cost of their water services, that frees up funding potentially in the household for some of these other essential services. I will say, as a personal note, I always think one of the critical things about making sure people are able to afford water or have water services provided to their home is that not having running water is sometimes a factor in determining whether or not children in the home are continue to live in that home or are placed elsewhere until the water can be turned back on. And so meeting those needs, I think, goes beyond even just the basic need of meeting water, which is a very basic need, right? That was another rambling answer. I'm sorry.
So then we're basically saying we're confident that this service is distributed equitably, and so we want all of our other maps to look exactly like this.
Yes. I mean, I think like any program, it's probably not perfect.
Sure.
But the wide distribution of it, that's actually one of the reasons we were interested in using it as a proxy as opposed to other programs like housing assistance, which may not be as widely distributed. It's very solid data. We know that we have the income data to support that program. And also the wide distribution suggests that people I hate to say it, it's not like our insulation grant program where clearly we've got work to do to reach the west side, but that it's a long existing program that people are aware of. They get regular information about it in their utility bills. If they miss a utility bill, a city staff will often reach out and say, are you aware of this utility program? So there's a way of sort of having some awareness at the city level of where the needs are and how it might be met, and that likely accounts for the wide distribution of it.
I looked up this program on the city's website, easy to find and easy to get the eligibility requirements and the discounts. Very interesting. I had no idea until I looked it up. But
Well, I guess that argues against us doing our work well, but I'm glad you know about it now.
I'm curious, is it advertised when someone maybe is late on a payment, or is it mailed out to a household like, hey, you could enroll in this program, or?
That's an excellent question. I actually don't know what the exact mechanism of contacting that household is, but we can find out.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I was going to say, I do love this map too, because it is interesting even looking at the insulation grant program. And, it seems like there might be a lot of opportunity on the west side specifically for that. But the fact that you have this data, and I mean, the other maps I was looking at were behavioral risk factors, surveillance system, like CDC places, but it's kind of unknown of, what the update. I would hope that it continues to be updated, but you own this data really, so it's like a reliable source that is close to real time. So I think that's the part that is a pro, because if it was CDC places too, it would be multiple years or estimates even, and you might not get exactly what you're looking for in regards to that one compared to this one.
I will say the other thing, we've been a little hard on our insulation grant program today, and I don't want to undersell our successes with that program. The other thing I see when I look at that map is the density. There are several hot spots on that heat map, and we've heard anecdotally when we ask people, like, how did you hear about this program? They'll say, oh, my neighbor got it, or someone in my condo association, or what have you. And so we know we've heard word of mouth is powerful, and I feel like this map really confirms that people are excited about this program and talking to others and referring them to it, which is also wonderful. We just need them to do it on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, overall, I really like this approach. It gives you like finer resolution than the census tracts. So yeah, great. I was wondering, and this is a nerdy question, but I was wondering if the scale on these color bars is the same between these two maps. In other words, does the yellow spot on the one map have the same density as the yellow spots on the other maps?
No. The utility discount program being a much longer run program, there are many more participants.
Okay, right.
So
they're normalized differently.
Right.
Okay.
We can adjust for that, though, can't we?
Yeah,
Would you
we
like to see a map adjusted for that in the future?
Yeah, I think I feel like it would be better to compare apples to apples and make sure that the scales are the same, even if that blows the, I don't know, maybe the utility discount program, you cut it off at a certain high density or something.
We could also always do both. We could do one with a normalized scale and one that just is what it is.
Sure.
Having driven a car with a sensor on the heat collection process, it's interesting to me that the university heights in these two maps, we have discrete spots on the insulation grant correlation, I guess, and then we have a more extensive sort of area mapped out on the other one. That's just, as I know with the heat thing, it can be asphalt. I mean, it can be, you're getting hotter areas not because you have people living there, but you have parking lots and stuff like that. But up on the discount program, you're getting a broader reading, which is interesting.
Part of the reason we have a gap around University Heights is actually is its own incorporated area, and so we can't provide services to them, though we were happy to include them in our heat mapping exercise. There's no good way to turn those sensors off when you hit University Heights, so they get the benefit of our data. Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so public comment, we have no one present, so we'll skip over that. Recap, confirmation of next meeting time is Monday, March 3rd, 4 o'clock to 5:30 here at MAJ Habit Hall. Actionable items for commission, working groups, and staff.
I have 3 that I've noted from this meeting. One is that I'm going to follow up with our attorney's office to find out if there's a conflict of interest for anyone on the commission who would like to participate in Burr Oak's shrub planting program. I'm going to follow up with the MPO about trip data and how we, like, if they're doing any sort of travel diaries or other better ways of us to capture the 55% trips metric. And then I will also ask about the utility discount program notification and let you know. Is following up by email sufficient for these, or would you like to hear them in the next meeting?
I think email would be great.
I'll follow up by email. And thanks for the catch on the meeting time. It is for next month.
All right. Okay, so motion to adjourn. Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.